To get us started, I'm just going to ask everyone on the panel to introduce themselves, just name and your position in the company, and maybe a one-sentence description of what your company does. We'll start on the left.
Sure. My name is Tony Jamous. I was the co-founder and CEO of Nexmo, which is a communication platform for messaging and voice. And at the moment, I'm an investor and independent advisor.
Okay. My name is Alberto Gonzalez. I'm a senior engineer at WebRTC.Ventures, and we specialize in building mobile and web applications, especially on the real-time communication field.
My name is Thomas Howe. I'm the CTO and founder of 10-Digit Communications. We make a call center application which is based on messaging.
Hi, my name is Dinesh Saparamadu. I'm the founder and the CEO of hSenid Mobile.
All right. So I'm going to start us off with a really lighthearted question. I really think this is the year of RCS. I'm eager to hear the panel's thoughts. So why don't we start with you, Tony?
Sure.
This is the year.
Yeah, well, I think there's a need in the market to, I would say, modernize SMS. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's a great tool. It's a common denominator, but it's an old school technology, runs on some weird signaling networks that were not designed for communication. There's lots of quality issues and signaling issues on the network. Few companies were able to solve some of these challenges. My company was one of them. However, I think it's time, after probably 30 years of this invention, to replace SMS with something more modern and more scalable. That being said, I don't think RCS is the future of that for many reasons. I think one is because it's going through the carrier network, and as you know, betting on the carriers to get any sort of standard is probably a wrong bet. And secondly, because we haven't really seen any traction for the last 12, 13 years of RCS existed. So why this year is the year of RCS, I don't know why. But again, I think that there is a need to replace that very powerful medium for something much more modern. So if anybody else, then Google can do this.
That sounds like a thumbs down then. And it sounds like a thumbs down from you. And this is the year.
Yes, it's thumbs down for now.
It's a tongue-in-cheek question, by the way. Not.
I will just briefly add. I don't add.
So also thumbs down.
I think so. Okay. I mean, if I ask to customers that one RCS or just first, they want, and if I explain them, it's hard to see the benefit of the, like what's the economic.
Right.
So,
Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah. So okay, now I'll continue my theme of the day. So if by that question, is this the year of RCS, you mean, is this the year where we're constantly distracted from the real problem to solve? Yes. I think this is going to be the year where we're still trying to be, distracted. And I think the real problem to solve, just to be frank about it, is it really is painful to communicate with companies. It's just painful. And that's the real problem to solve. And that's what we should be thinking about, not unifying this and...
All right.
Nothing much to say because the year is ending already. So we have not seen anything happening.
All right. That's an easy way to... but okay, so staying with our topic of fun terminology to debunk, let's talk about AI. And boy, I could rant about this for a long time, but I'm the moderator, so this is not my turn to rant. The question here is AI delivering in customer service, or is it just marketing fluff? Tony, let's start with you.
Well, it's both. There is some real innovation happening in the AI conversational space. I mean, you've seen a number of companies that are really tackling the main issue of how do you get some sort of narrow AI to work in certain contexts. Let's say, for instance, a vertical, let's say you take banking. Okay? You can develop certain models that can predict the intent of the conversation, for instance, and codify some of the responses. Yes, I think that's what is today available in technology. However, it's not well deployed because that technology is still very difficult to integrate. When you look at the existing easy-to-use solution, the Twilios of the world and the CPaaSes of the world, well, they don't necessarily connect well with these solutions. Still very, you have to train the model and you have to connect it. So if you're a big bank, you might access this solution. It's going to cost you, $5 million to do it. So that's kind of where we are today. But it's hype because, I received today so many pitches of new companies, and they all have certain AI in their model, and 80% of them is still marketing fluff.
My rule of thumb these days is to replace the word AI with just software. If you just swap those words in anything you read, you end up pretty much with the same meaning.
Yeah, pretty much.
Alberto, I'm sure you have some thoughts on AI.
Yeah, actually I mentioned a bit AI a few times, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's just software development, but a bit applied with some somewhat functions and things that are typically used for machine learning, like that.
Right.
But I've seen very good use cases as well. It's true that sometimes it can be a bluff. It can be also something that is very fancy to show. If you show it just as a marketing technique.
But to be fair, in your presentation, you used it to reference specific technology that would not have been possible 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Unfortunately, it's used in much sloppier ways throughout the industry. I think that's one of the main problems. Thomas, any thoughts on AI?
Oh, yeah.
Please share.
Okay, so again, to continue with the theme, I think we've got two things wrong with AI. The first thing we got wrong was, and to kind of riff off what both of you said, the first thing about AI I think we got wrong was and I helped with this, so I'm as guilty as the rest, that we were coming to this AI idea with the real value of it is to replace agents, we can replace people with smart things, so why do we need people? And I think actually in practice, AI has a really great long road in front of it to help coach people, but not much of a one to replace people. I think that's a real distinction because it really narrows down what you do and why you do it. And so first thing is, I think AI is much more about observing and coaching people than it is about replacing people. The second thing I think we got wrong about AI is that it's really universally applicable for anything we're going to be doing. And I think the opportunity in messaging to use AI to coach messaging agents is clear as a bell. It's pretty simple to integrate. You can find good use cases. It's not so hard. Just the template I would use is it's really simple to make an AI thing that would tell you if your customer is angry, just by looking at the words they use. Right? That's simple to do in messaging. That's really hard to do in voice because
analysis.
of the
sentiment analysis.
Sentiment analysis, yeah, that's quite straightforward to do in AI. And will help your agents and your supervisors manage your agents. Like, why are you making all these people angry, Mr. Agent, as an example, right? And the mistake is that we keep thinking it's going to be universal to the other parts of communication, like voice, which I think is very difficult to do. I think that's not something we should be tackling, frankly. I think we should wait.
All right.
So just a comment. I think it's an interesting part of that is if you really look at using AI or maybe looking at from a chat box, from a bot standpoint, from a customer service. We talked about how do you do handover, seamless handover, or frictionless handover. If you can really kind of look at what the question or something the chatbot is answering, and then depending on that expertise, when the time is needed for it to kind of get converted into an agent, you actually transfer the whole thing with the history, and it transferred to the right agent who can actually solve that. I think there's a value there, rather than you're getting through 10 people, so I think that's where you will have some kind of applicability, which will be a great way.
Well, you brought up chatbots, which is actually also on our list here to talk about. So that's a natural segue. Chatbots they sort of entered our collective conscience with a huge bang a few years ago. I don't know if you guys remember this with the big Facebook announcement. And then they were the flavor of the week for a few weeks. And then there seems to have been the old trough of disillusionment. But now I'm starting to see some actual success stories come out with real metrics tied to them. So it seems like we've crossed the chasm, so to speak. Are you guys seeing the same? Are you bullish in general on chatbots? If not, what's the missing piece? How do you see it ultimately fitting into the overall ecosystem of customer service? We'll start with Tony.
Yeah, so there's definitely a place for chatbots in customer engagement. It's going to be the conversational interface for many of these applications, and the technology is there. You have Google was it's called Dialogflow, I think. You have IBM Watson, but you have Amazon Lex. There's very maturing chatbot interfaces out there. I think the challenge is really around how do you connect that to your business. Imagine a bank, a financial institution, and want to really take all these data and turn it into a great customer experience. I think this is very hard for many, many, many enterprises to do. The best example I've seen is Amazon e-commerce. Buying on Amazon and you have an issue, how do you reach out to their support? How do you communicate with them? And I was impressed to see that actually they do have a pretty strong chatbot experience, and I can solve 95% of my issues without talking to a human being and very quick chat interaction. So companies that are born digital and have massive scale, chatbot will be an amazing technology for them. But for the rest that are stuck in legacy system, I think it's going to be 10, 20 years before they reap any benefit from it.
All right. Alberto, you want to pass? Thomas, thoughts on chatbot? I'm sure you have thoughts on chatbot.
Yeah, sure, of course. So I think there's a spectrum that we have to keep in mind when we talk about chatbots, and it's the empathy spectrum. That things which will score high on empathy will score low on chatbots. And so just to put the blockers for the spectrum, I think chatbots are great at collecting billing addresses and scheduling, when you want to do something, and really bad for making you feel better or getting you a date. Right? Those are bad things. And I think what we'll find is, chatbots will, and as a proof point, just consider how much time and energy we spent outsourcing jobs from the United States into the East. And the hardest problem that we weren't ever able to solve was the culture problem. How do you convince someone in Milwaukee that the person they're talking to is also from Milwaukee when they're not from Milwaukee? And they had in their disposal the world's best computer, a person. And they couldn't solve that problem. There's just no way I see that being solved by software anytime soon because of that.
Right. Fair enough. That's a good answer. Dinesh, anything to add on
I think
chatbots?
the chatbot has its own place, but it needs to evolve. I think, the best way is, you really look at some of your interactions, and then I have seen very good chatbot, done by financial institutions. At the same time, I also see very, very poorly, and it just kind of takes you round and round, but then you have no way of kind of going into an agent. I think that's a bad chatbot, but I think if you build it right, the initial, and especially, like I said, routing, if you are able to route to the right person. So if I'm looking at this particular thing you already have in your customer success or customer service, okay, this is where it needs to get routed. So if you can have that kind of routing, intelligent routing built in, I think then you have some possibilities.
That's good. Something to add, Thomas?
Yeah, one thing, because you're absolutely right. I also have another theory about chatbots. It's the website theory. That 95% of all websites are boring and valueless and just snoozing.
Right.
And I think chatbots have the same sort of thing. 95% are really boring, don't have a lot of value. And then there's Facebook, and there's Google, and there's these other really important websites, and there's going to be a couple really important chatbots, but they're rare. And
Right. Can anyone else? So Tony shared a story about Amazon, right? Were you the one who told the chatbot story? Right. Anyone else have a positive story about a actual chatbot experience that they can recall and share?
I'm a fan of the one-word survey chatbot. That at the end of an integration, the chatbot says, "So how was it?"
And
you give it an answer, unstructured, like great, fantastic, annoying, upsetting, and you get a really quick, survey of a consumer that has all the emotion and all the context you need. That's simple for them to do. I think it's a great thing for a chatbot.
Your NPS score.
Sorry?
Your NPS score for your SaaS companies,
Yeah.
and then if you did 5, would you go and give us a review on Capterra?
I think a bad example is Hotels.com. So try to change your booking through chatbot on the mobile app is an awful experience. If you leave the app, you have to restart from scratch the conversation, and there's no way to be asked to be handed to an agent.
Exactly.
So you're stuck. And these guys have all the technology stack. They are very modular in architecture, and they still can't implement such a simple technology.
Yeah, or any chatbot on a web page. Because you're doing it, and then you walk away, and you come back, and the web page is gone. Right?
The whole history is gone.
Oh, it's all gone. Yeah,
and
right.
you have to
Yeah,
start again. with
yeah, exactly.
somebody else.
It's another me twice.
My big beef with people talking about chatbots in the industry is they're often touting how many interactions the chatbot did. They'll say, oh, it spoke to 1 million people or it had a million interactions. And they rarely talk about how many of those were successful. If they do talk about the success, they say, oh, it successfully handled, 10,000, 100,000 interactions. Okay, that's better. But then the next question that's interesting is, of those interactions, how many of them would have been self-serve anyway, just in some other mode? In other words, yes, the chatbot gave you the opening hours of the store, but if it weren't there, you could have gotten it from the website. The real question, and you rarely hear people give this data, is how often did the chatbot replace completely a human interaction? Because that's kind of the implied promise that everyone is talking about, but then the data they give is slightly off from answering that direct question. Yes, Thomas.
So I'm not sure they intended this, but LivePerson had this really great video about their automation experience in a contact center in Puerto Rico. And the woman who was in charge of the AI machine learning part was happy to report that, yes, people like the chatbots, and it increased employment because they needed more people to help the chatbots get their work done.
That's right.
Fantastic.
All right, so we should move on to a couple of the topics before we run out of time, and I want to leave some time for audience questions. So one of the questions on our list here is talking about Facebook and WhatsApp and SMS, and so this picks up a little bit on the presentation I gave earlier today, and one of the conclusions there was the fragmentation. Okay, so first let's just set the stage. We're going to talk about North America only. This is obviously, these questions change dramatically when you go to a different geography. But let's just talk about North America. It seems like the fragmentation between Apple and Google and Facebook is going to continue for the foreseeable future. They may win points against one another year over year, but it seems like the default winner there is SMS because it's the only one people can count on. Does that conclusion seem right? If it's wrong, what am I missing? If you see the future unfolding a different way, I'd love to hear it. Let's start with Tony.
So there's two parts to your question. There's the North America question and then the rest of the world question. Right? So in North America, yes, SMS is a de facto common denominator, and many brands will use that as a way to communicate with the customer. There's actually a relatively successful company in the US that offers 0800 numbers, toll-free numbers that are SMS capable. What's the name of the company? They raised like $80 million ZipWhip, exactly. So this just, and that's a very US-centric business. I mean, they raised over $100 million of a subscription for businesses to enable their phone numbers to be textable.
Right.
One market. So, however, in the US, I think you're going to see increasingly Apple Business Chat or the iPhone community or users becomes very popular because it's high value consumers, and they're really controlling the experience to be a good messaging experience. That's for the US. And for the rest of the world, it seemed that excluding China, Japan, and Korea, where you have WeChat, Line, and Kakao, the WhatsApp for Business is killing it. We see, when I used to run Nexmo, we've seen massive demand for WhatsApp for Business APIs. And although WhatsApp wasn't ready, and I'm not sure they are still ready, but there is a huge demand from enterprises to enable conversational commerce and customer support on WhatsApp for Business.
Okay, anyone else want to add to that?
Well, I think that was a great overview of the status. I think if you start, as you said, I agree, if you start with something, probably the US would be today, like if you ask me. Yes. But yeah, that depends on the location. If you are in the US, that's the first one, and then there are some other easy to implement too, like maybe Facebook. One pretty common, but yeah. It depends also on the use.
Sure.
We are focused.
All right.
Add that actually 2039, I think it will be the year of the RCS.
2039?
2039, I think that's where RCS will take over the world.
Alan, do we have a venue yet for TAD Summit 2039? No?
Not yet.
All right, you should get on that.
Yeah. So I deal with a lot of enterprise, a lot of business messaging, and so I'm all in on SMS because of the data provenance issue. I mean, there's no way that the United States Army is going to put their communications on Facebook, and that's because they can't control who reads the message as they send it through Facebook. They just know that Facebook's going to read it. Well, just imagine all the different regulatory issues between banking and healthcare and government and security that they themselves have data provenance issues. That if you're a bank, do you really want a third-party concern like Facebook running through all of your messages? You'd rather not. And so any enterprise that has that sort of data idea, which they all do, I think will naturally start to choose SMS because it has these lowest attack vector for the security of their data.
Right. Now there's a flip side to that, which is with WhatsApp and others you get encryption, which makes people more comfortable as opposed to SMS, which has no encryption.
Well, there's a distinction between secure and private, where you can get security out of Facebook, but it's not private because Facebook can see it. I mean, remember that old saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I mean, the whole point behind all these social, offers is that, they derive data that's valuable to them for advertising or whatever, and they have to be able to derive the data to get the value. They don't derive data in SMS. You don't derive value from the data. Therefore, business models can be built upon it that don't require you to derive the data, so it can stay, private.
Right. Dinesh, anything to add?
Yeah, I think SMS is actually the lowest common denominator to start with. But I think especially when you go into enterprise and some of the other business use cases, you'll actually use SMS as your common denominator to start the conversation. But what happens is you will have embedded WhatsApp link or other links that comes through your SMS, and then you start actually building the profile of the customer, and then you will actually start more rich communication through those channels after that. Because building that, the first part would be the SMS, but I think after that you will actually, you can build profiles. We have seen people doing that, and that's how you will get a lot of that kind of.
Right. So SMS is the on-ramp, and then send them a link.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we do audience questions? Do we have time? Are there audience questions? Why don't we ask that question first? See if anyone wants to ask something of our esteemed panel. All right, well, I'll follow up on the last thread there, which is, oh, I missed it. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So a lot of effort has been put into making the channel secure. A lot of times we talk about 4G versus 2G, and the channel is made secure. Do you think it will be more prudent to make the data secure? So even if the SMS is hacked, the data itself is contained, and the sender and receiver have encoded the data, so that, let's say, I don't speak Russian, for example, but if two Russians are speaking and I can snoop on the conversation, I still cannot understand. So any thoughts on that?
So I think one of the natural endpoints for the carriers is to be the source of not only of encryption and for them to assert that this message has been brought to you unsnooped, unadulterated, but also to do things like identity. Like the person who sent you this message from this phone number actually is carrying the cell phone they say they are. And that's a place for them to finally come to. And I think that's going to be unique because the SMS is universal, and I think it's part of the natural monopoly of the phone number is to also say, okay, this is identifying naturally. So I think in the end of time, carriers will do that, and until then, I'm not sure anyone else can do that. I'd be surprised if they actually could.
You do have some binary component to this. You can send a binary SMS if you want, so maybe you can encrypt certain in there, but I haven't seen anybody have done that yet.
All right.
Maybe RCS will. Maybe, no, I think RCS is going to take it over.
Definitely
this is the
will.
thing right now.
Yeah, 2039.
Right, 2039.
Any other questions from the audience?
It's a bit of a follow-on to the last one, which was about how we protect against fake messaging either way, whether that's on a message, whether it's with voice. How do we deal with sort of the whole sort of deep fake issue, even if it's video in future?
It's exactly why I think only the carriers at the end can assert it. It's because you have to combine the end-to-end problem of communications. So anyone here who's a communications major for here in the university, this is where it matters. The end-to-end problem can only be defined by the things on the end. And what's on the end? The carrier is on the end, the handset and the person. Therefore, it can be the only one who guarantees the end-to-end. So that's why I think at the end, as we get towards the conclusion of it, who else could have possibly done it except for the people on the end of it, and who else is on the end of it? Huh? Well, the man in the middle can't. That's the point.
Well, there is a whole risk of SIM swaps. Referring to it? No?
Actually, I think there's a panel tomorrow about identity, right? And today. There you go. A whole panel on identity and fraud. Okay, so let's wrap it up there and give a round of applause to our great panel.